We want to thank everybody for coming. You're lucky today. I'm sparing you from the other bald partner at Magna Legal Services, Peter Hecht, who normally would be doing, for many of you who have been on these webinars before, would be doing something a lot more outlandish than I am. So you're all saved here, at least for the moment. So my name is Mark Calzaretta. I am one of the founding partners at Magna Legal. Many of you know from our conferences that, we've done various conferences, and now in this, post-corona or during our COVID breakout here where we're doing everything virtually, this is another one of our conference series, which Rich Fabian, who you'll see here along with the other panelists, Rich Fabian, who was instrumental in all of our conference programs, is also here with me and with the rest of us. So I wanted to thank Rich. He's always instrumental with all of our conferences and all of our programs. And Bob Tyson is going to be moderating. I'm going to let him actually introduce the entire panel. But for many of you, so my name is Mark Calzaretta. I head up our consulting group. I'm our lead jury consultant. I'll be talking about some of the jury issues and just some of the COVID effect, if you will. But other than that, I'm going to step into the background and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tyson, Mr. Bob Tyson here, to introduce the panelists, and he's going to be our moderator. So with that, I will turn it over to Bob. And now you don't have to worry about being quiet, Bob. You actually can talk and you don't have to worry about a dog barking or anything like that. So there you go.
Thanks, Mark. Looking at the chat, everyone was worried I was going to say something like really stupid. Everyone's warning me, like the mic, like you guys think like I don't have a filter or something. So everyone's worried about. I got a filter. Maybe not today. Well, thank you, Mark. I am so excited. We have got a great panel today, and we're going to get into it. Let's just get into it. We have a PowerPoint here that we'll go through for sure, but I'll tell you right now, we're not going to get through it because of the panel you guys have. And I want you guys to take advantage of it. We've got questions and answers. So we've got a Q&A box that you have there. So if you've got a question, please use the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to all your questions. We've got a super big turnout today. And then we're going to be asking you questions, and if you can answer them in the chat. So Q&A for questions, chat for answers. And all right, how's everybody doing? The chat looks like it's working. I'm doing all right. Thank you for asking, everyone. And just trying to eat my way through this pandemic, pretty much. Everyone wants to know when like the pandemic's going to be over. They want to know like when they can go back to work, when they go to restaurants. I just need like a warning so I can fit into pants at some point. So that's why I want to know when it's over. But thanks for asking, people. So real quick introductions, because I think a lot of you know everyone here and their reputation speaks for themselves. But first, Julia Macias, she is with Sysco. She's the manager of their casualty claims. How long have you been with them, Julia?
Let's see, on their payroll, 5 years.
5 years on the payroll. Did you used to volunteer for them? Do you do a lot of corporate volunteering?
Oh, Cisco's been in my life for a long time. I was a vendor previously, so it's been a long relationship, a good one. So
cool. And Julia manages claims all across all 50 states, so she's got a countrywide experience. And then we've got Stefanie Milch, who I've known for a long time. Stefanie's been handling big cases across the country for a really long time. And right now she's vice president at Hallmark Financial. And are you sitting in Texas right now, Stefanie?
I am. I moved from New York to Texas.
Big move.
I manage the primary and excess transportation books of business, as well as aviation.
Wow. Well, great. And lots of experience with big cases. We've worked together on some really big cases. So thrilled to have her here. You guys have to tap into her knowledge, ask these questions. And we've got Rich Fabian. Rich is Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at RiverStone Insurance Company. Where are you sitting right now, Rich?
I'm in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Ooh,
where our offices are. I'm sitting in my now office.
Formerly, what was it?
The crap room. No, it's where we keep books and my old synthesizers and a bunch of different things. So I was relegated here. So nice to see everyone. Nice to see the participation.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And then Mark Calzaretta, who probably needs no introduction. He is got a screen in the back of him so that we all don't know he's on his yacht, either off Miami Beach or the Jersey Shore somewhere.
Catching
You want to tell us where you are, Mark?
I tell you, I am in New Jersey, and the water is very near. Let's put it that way.
Very near. So if we see the screen rocking a little bit, we kind of know
don't
where
worry
you are.
about it. That means
All right.
that means that the seakeeper jumped out on the boat, so the gyro's out. That's all.
All right. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. And again, this is just an outline. We can go in whatever direction you guys want. I know we're going to go in a lot of different directions. But we're talking about juries and kind of trying to figure out what plaintiffs' attorneys will be up to, and really do a deep dive with everyone's experiences to what are juries going to do. And we're going to talk about what's changed, what's going to change, what can you guys do, and maybe talk about damages a little bit if we have time. So let me ask you guys out there, anyone out there in the chat world, in chat room, has the law changed? I mean, is that what's changed since this pandemic? Has there been a big change in the law? Come on, you guys got to type in. If you don't type in, we're just going to stop right here. Guys, I said we don't go on. All right, there we go. Nope. Lots of no's. No, so no big change in the laws. I mean, I guess they're talking about it in Congress right now. Maybe changing some of the law. So what has changed? What do you get? I mean, a lot's changed in the world, but with respect to jury trials, future jury trials, what has changed out there? The attitudes have changed. Pete Piotrowski, he's on fire down there in Florida. People have lost their damn minds. Maybe. What do you guys think? Julia, what do you think? Do you think people have changed much?
I think there's some people are angry, some people are worried, they think the world's coming to an end. There's just a variety of emotions. So pandemonium sometimes.
Pandemonium, people all over. Stefanie, what do you think about what's going on with people right now?
I think emotions are heightened right now. I don't want to sound callous or anything, but during this time, a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys have reached out to us, and they're more willing to settle their cases. Their clients are very emotional. They're concerned about what's going to happen. They're concerned about money. They're concerned about their health. They're concerned about financial stability. And during the last couple of months, it's not that we've wanted to take advantage of that in any respect, but claimants are wanting to push more towards settlement now than any other time that I've seen.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Rich, how about you? Are you seeing plaintiffs more eager to settle lately or not so much?
I don't know if we've noticed that yet. There's been a fair amount of activity, the mediations being done remotely, et cetera. And I'm not disagreeing. I just, personal knowledge, don't have any. I think, though, what we can safely glean from this is everyone always brings their personal experience to a jury or a negotiation or whatever it is. And this is one of those rare events that is affecting everyone throughout the world, but certainly in the country. So how it breaks, I think we're going to talk about today, but I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. We've done research in specific locations where there might be an outbreak of molestation cases or whatever that affects the jury because of the press. This is national. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it affects people. And I'm sure that's what we're going to explore today, because fundamentally they act from their personal experiences.
Yeah. And no, absolutely. So you mentioned research, Rich, and Mark Calzaretta and his team at Magna has done some research. And I think folks can see it on their screen. Mark, do you want to talk about this a little bit? This was, when did you guys do this research? And maybe tell us a little bit what you did.
Yeah, so we've been tracking. So, like everybody else, right? We had, if you remember when President Trump made like that announcement on like a Thursday night and the NBA, all the games were, shutting down. It was around March, right? Like March 20th, 21st, something right around there. And everything sort of just came to a screeching halt. So we, at that point, our focus groups, trial schedule, all that, just like everyone else, and, kind of came to a screeching halt, right? So, but as that has ramped up and we've gotten back, and we're pretty much running the same amount of research right now that we were running pre-COVID, although it's all virtually. So right around the end of April, we started tracking in pre-stim questions. So before the focus groups, where we ask attitudes and biases at the actual research. But this is part of a larger study where it's a national study where we had, I think it was about 1,500 participants, jury eligible people across the United States in sort of key places where we asked a series of questions related to COVID. And you'll see here, sort of like some people had a change. People felt, say, more vulnerable, 50% of the population. And to Rich's point about, it's all about your perspective, right? Or like an individual experience, things of that nature. And some of the other questions, you'll start to see some of the changes in them. But you'll see here is like, do they feel more vulnerable? I think to everyone's point, emotions and things like that, generally speaking, the majority, 50% of the people feel more vulnerable. But it's kind of a mixed bag, then the rest say, hey, no, it's no big deal, right? No big deal. And I think what we also saw was this depends, like if you poll just New York, for example, it's way different. So this is more of a national poll, but that's the difference. If you start getting into some of the different regions, because like in Montana, they were barely affected, right? And that goes to population. It also goes to a lot of other reasons. New York was crazy, right? And now Florida sort of has this sort of outbreak. So this has sort of been changing, but this is an idea of just some of the answers. Now, if you move ahead, I think, Bob, there's some more, right? There's some
Yeah,
more.
absolutely.
And some of them that I thought was, like, for example, if you were a juror on a civil case with a corporate defendant, would how they handle business employees during the COVID outbreak affect your views of the corporation? So, kind of mixed bag, right? It's like a horse race. Some people say yes, some people say not so much, right? So, but I think like it's important for that 55%, because what we were also seeing was those people were way more emotional in some of the background questions in addition. So if you're getting them onto your jury, that's a heightened burden that now you're under a microscope. And I think one of the ones that's coming up in particular for a lot of the insurance folks and for the folks that do a lot of insurance work, sort of business interruption insurance, like claims for business. What we found was that people wholeheartely thought that any BI claims for COVID should just be paid. And like you saw that, and that was kind of you're like, whoa, like, if you have any business interruption claims or any business claims related to COVID, and Rich, this gets into like coverage litigation, which we've done a lot of, that attitude's pretty, is aggressive, I would say. And if we move forward, you'll start to see some of these, But
hold on one sec. Hold on. You're talking about business interruption. Let me interrupt you for a second. Yeah, there you go. Julia, let me ask you, it's kind of a mixed bag here, right? Where it's saying some jurors care about how corporations are handling the pandemic right now. And, they're kind of predicting how they're going to feel 6 months from here, a year from now, 2 years from now. And some say it has no impact. What do you think about that? And how do you think you should handle cases because of that?
I think Stefanie mentioned that people are getting very reasonable in trying to resolve things. Our organization, we have food, we have groceries. We've continued to be in business, if you will. I mean, people need to eat, and we've had to get very creative in how we market throughout the country, and helping our customers to continue their business, as well as even the larger grocers, helping them with groceries. So, people want to eat. So I think for us, I've had, in the last, since March, I've had where, we've all had to deal with this nuclear verdicts issues where people were just crazy on what they felt their claim was worth. I think people are really getting realistic to, a real number. mediators always say, no one goes happy and that's a good settlement. But I think that, I've seen less of these crazy demands here in the last 4 months.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, the pandemic has been great for nuclear verdicts, right? Hasn't been one single nuclear verdict during all this. But you raise a good point. It might help with social inflation too, right? Because people look to nuclear verdicts and then they want more for their claims, right? Which is kind of social inflation. So that's a pretty good point. I hadn't thought of.
You see, I see that slide and I think to myself, and obviously it depends on the kind of case, whether that kind of evidence could come in. But what that slide means is in your average jury, 6 to 7 of the people sitting there care about this. So it's an issue, period.
Yeah.
That's the way I read that slide.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's see. What do we got next here? So, Mark, you got some more data for us here?
Yeah, so this is one, just trying to see back to like Rich's point about like personal experience. We always, when all of us, when you're trying to evaluate the case, and especially jurors, you're thinking about like how do these personal experiential issues impact them or their decision making or what have you. And again, here, this is just kind of trying to get to like the financial impact. Everyone's been impacted, right? It's pretty hard not to be in some way. Everyone's been touched by this in a myriad of ways, but sort of getting to like, are you going to change your habits? Are you going to get more conservative? Are you going to just go out and like put it all on black because, the world could end tomorrow, like which way are you going? And, this is again, sort of getting to like their attitudes, their emotions, their feelings, how it sort of can relate into, deeper, so to speak, as far as the impact that it would have on their perception of how they're evaluating information when they're seeing it, damages, effect on people, and so on and so forth. So,
yeah, and no, that's a great point. So, Stefanie, what do you think? We've got Magna's, data here and research and metrics, but does it matter any that we're not talking about their money? We're just talking about funny money. We're talking about jury money. You think that changes anything?
I don't think that it changes anything.
Good.
I think that people are definitely becoming more conservative. I think that this has affected a lot of people. These are all facts. The unemployment rate is the highest that it's ever been. How this affects people sitting on juries is going to be unknown at this point. They could either be very sympathetic to that or not so sympathetic to it because it's, touched them, and they may be presented with, somebody making such a claim, and this won't, they've been through that, they've struggled, and it's either going to affect them one or two ways. They're going to be very sympathetic or not so sympathetic. But in any event, the emotions are going to be magnified.
I think you're right. I think the point there is that everyone's affected. There is no like, hey, let's screen people before we bring them in for jury selection, or who's been impacted by the coronavirus, right? Mm-hmm. There's no screening for that. Right. Rich was talking about that. So they're all affected, and it's just a matter of how. But it does seem like everything's going to be a little more magnified, either positively or negatively, because everyone's kind of on edge here.
Mark, I see, I don't know if anyone's monitoring these questions, but somebody was asking what age group was polled. And I think a second question was, did you have some sort of baseline data on people's attitudes towards corporations before they answered?
Yeah, so yes, we've had attitudes against, so two parts. First, these are all age groups. These aren't broken out. This is sort of like a split sort of demographic of jury eligible folks, right? So there's no people that can't participate on a jury in this, but it's sort of a mixed bag. It's not broken out or dissected yet by like millennials or anything like that by any demographic group. So this is just a whole sort of general mixed bag of age groups, let's say, but they're all jury eligible. And then attitudes about certain aspects no on this questionnaire, because attitudes about corporations, yes, their distrust of corporations, like Rich, you've known, and Stefanie, I know you've been at many focus groups and mock trials. Julie, I know I haven't worked with you on a mock trial focus group, but that question that we ask a lot of times, corporations choose profits over safety, right? That gets sort of a reptile-ish, but it's also about an attitude. So we know that generally the population feels that corporations choose profits over safety, right? So they've got this distrust of corporations, although we've also tracked where there was a high level of distrust post, and this is going back now well over a decade when we got back to Enron. And Rich, you're very familiar with these questions too, as you talk about who they're most likely to distrust in a courtroom proceeding. It was always like CEOs and CFOs, right? And management level. So there was some distrust of corporate America, although now that has dissipated in the past several years. So we do have baselines for certain aspects, but not as specific to COVID. And like, for example, like business interruption, and general feelings. I will say this: the questions that aren't in here about their feelings about insurance companies in general, I saw no change in their feelings about insurance companies pre-COVID to any of the data that we collected in this study. So basically they feel the same about insurance carriers that they did before. There's been no, and that could change over time, right? Because as they experience anything COVID related, claims related in their individual lives or through their friends or through business, that could change. But right now there's been no change. So,
well,
and this is the BI. This is the BI. If you compare strongly agree and agree, right? That's 78% of people, right? That's a lot. That's not a good thing, right? In a coverage case, it's not going to be a good thing.
It just sounds like in a coverage case, you're going to want the judge to decide this, and hope, according to this study, they're not a person apparently. If you're representing the insurance companies,
it depends if, and I just don't know. I mean, I'd want to know. I've seen pretty strong reactions to contract language. It's the one thing, every time I do jury research, I get tremendously frustrated and end up having to be restrained and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I think is consistent is this, across demographics, across educational background, people are actually interested in what was the deal that people made and what was the contract they signed. So without knowing more on this question, all I'm saying is this is very alarming, because I also know that most of the policies issued in the US excluded this kind of thing. But the question is, did the people that were answering this question know this, or do they just hear business interruption and think, well, it should be covered, which a lot of people would have that reaction. I don't know. So I'm just saying there's more to be done around this before I think we were definitely not going in front of a jury.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. Yeah, and I wouldn't say that these are so overly alarming, but they are interesting, in the sense of sort of like what the responses are. But I think the jury's still out, right? I mean,
it's very alarming, but I just, all I'm saying is, I don't want to overreact, because if for example they had seen the contract and then said that's a settlement, I mean, you're going to lose 8 out of 10 times.
And like the question now that's on the screen, that's interesting to me, because look at how it's so overwhelming for healthcare professionals. So like, you think about med mal cases or cases where you have professional like doctors coming in or something like that. How does this play into that? And the answer is we don't know, but we know that now there's a heightened sense of compassion for people in the healthcare field where it wasn't before. When you asked this before, people were like, kinda, like, I mean, you wouldn't get this kind of response. It's very similar to like first responders after 9/11, all the post 9/11 studies that we were doing, or that I was doing, everybody, right? It was everything about the first responders. Now what I can tell you about that, what shifted was, in the beginning, it was all that. And then there was sort of this curl back afterwards with the 9/11 stuff that I studied. And this is kind of gets into what everyone's talking about. It's too early to tell, where then when we were doing some of the studies, it turned to like, well, that's part of the job for the first responders. You know what I mean? That's what you signed up for, where it wasn't like that for four years. And then all of a sudden jurors, populace changed about their attitude toward it. And the only reason why I point that out is because it's related to this, in the sense of, what does this mean? I don't know just yet, but it's pretty overwhelming that people are heightened. So what is that going to mean when you have a healthcare professional come in and testify in one of your cases? So.
Yeah. What do you think, Julia? I know you handle or oversee a lot of injury cases. Do you think this is going to give plaintiffs, experts, they're hired guns? Are they going to have more credence when they're testifying, you think? And how might it impact the defense? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that, I have a nurse in the family, but I feel like now the healthcare field, it's almost like this is World War III. And they're soldiers, and it's a tough war that we're fighting. It's worldwide. So I think just like when you have a soldier as a juror or even as a plaintiff, there's that sympathy factor for someone that, risked their lives for the greater good. So, we have military staff, and so that's something that, and every state's going to be different. We're getting word on some states that are, deeming that COVID is a compensable injury. So it's interesting. It's almost like day by day and what's coming. But I see, in the future, any juror that is a healthcare nurse, doctor, is going to be similar to how a soldier is considered. I mean, this is a war.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound so extremist, but I don't think we've ever had anything like this. And, this is the first for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on, but, I see some questions here. So we did not prepare this one. So I'm just going to throw this out to our panelists. We just went through the data. Mark and Magna have done this research. And we've got real data as opposed to just sharing things that we've met people in the grocery store and attitude. So we've got some real data here, some real research. And I didn't ask you guys this question, so it's not fair, and I may never be the moderator again. However, just seeing that data, how do you think you should handle anything on your desk differently today? Anything that might be going to trial? Is there anything that you think your defense counsel should be doing differently based upon the data? And I'll start with Stefanie. I think Stefanie hasn't gone in a while. What do you think? Anything you can, I didn't prepare you guys for this, so I apologize, but to see all this, what do you think maybe we should be doing differently?
All of our trials in the past couple of months, all the March ones have been pushed, all the April ones, June, now July, August. They're getting pushed into next year, which again is making our claimants very eager to settle their cases because they don't know when they're going to get their day in court. They don't know what it's going to be like once they do get their day in court. Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be Zoom? I know some courts now are talking about having Zoom trials. So my direction to defense counsel at this point is to reach out to claimants' attorneys, see if they're willing to be reasonable and see what we could do. I mean, that's like the initial direction, to see what we could do about resolving it, knowing that all this is in play. Because we don't know how it's going to be on our side. They don't know how it's going to be for them. A lot of this is speculation at this point.
Yeah. So Rich, let me ask you, you've heard the data from Mark about how juries are going to be different, their impressions of corporations and how they're doing. And folks, feel free to put in the chat, what do you think we should be doing differently now that you've got this data also? Rich, I'll ask you, anything that you think your outside counsel should be doing differently now or at your first jury trials that you may end up having?
Well, I think you do want to explore settlement options. It's stating the obvious, but there's a whole variety of things going on, either economic distress or people frustrated with their inability to move their cases forward. So that's certainly something we would normally explore anyway, but I think that just almost goes without saying, but should be said. There's probably opportunities out there now that didn't exist before, and they should be explored. But I think if I had something going to trial now, there's some really interesting questions that arise out of this pandemic and actually the social unrest that's going on. I'd want to, I'm going to plug Magna here, but it's absolutely true. I'd want to do research, because the short answer here is, if somebody thought they were going to tune in today and get the answer to what the jurors are going to be like post-pandemic, I'd love to hear it too, because we don't know yet. So I'd want to see research on that, start figuring out, is it going to vary by case, med mal versus a corporate defendant? Yeah, I think so. But, I'd like to see that in person. So what I'd be doing is I would probably question everything that I thought I knew before this pandemic, and at least get a couple of research projects under my belt so I could get a better handle on what it's going to be like post-pandemic and post-social unrest. There's a lot going on right now. People are cooped up, and it's not really jury related, but the last thing I'll say is also I'm interested to see these judges, that some were notoriously slow anyway, but some were just overburdened, but everything ground to a halt for months. So anyone's desk that was cluttered is worse now. How are they going to react? So there's a whole bunch of stuff I'd want to know. And the fact is, we're not going to get answers today. We can point out issues, and certainly the research is interesting and some of it's ominous. But I'd want to do very specific research on my jury pool to see how they were affected.
Yeah, I think, Bob, if I could just add,
Yeah.
last month, we ran 26 or 27 focus groups and mock trials. In June, we have 31 this month. So we're running a lot of research across the United States, all virtually, and I haven't seen, like, with these attitudes that I just put up. Now I've had some coverage cases, and I've had large PI, like personal injury cases, some contract stuff. I've had a patent. I can't say that I'm seeing an outward in any of the discussions yet in the deliberations. Or did we start seeing crazy verdicts in cases, or, at least in the research so far? I have not seen it. And I think we have this conversation within my team and my staff. We haven't seen anything totally crazy yet. So I agree with Rich, though. I don't think it's over. Like, I want to see what happens. Like, does it rear its head later? So right now we're so close to it. We haven't had the full effect yet. It hasn't totally taken a grip if it's going to. I think these attitudes are important. They're important for specific cases, but to give you like a perspective from actual jury deliberations and discussions, and you're talking about 3 panels over, right? 3 panels of 10 to 12 jurors over 60 exercises in the past 8 weeks. So you start doing the math of how many people are in these exercises that we've had. And I'm not necessarily seeing anything yet that would cause me to go like, oh my God, we can't have a jury trial. The virtual trials are different. I think that's a whole nother thing. But that being said, that we haven't seen these attitudes necessarily rearing their heads in a negative way that would drive me to say, hey, we can't have a jury trial here right now. For what
Julia,
it's worth.
thank you, Mark. Julia, you didn't get to weigh in on this. Anything based upon the data that Magna has shared that you would want to maybe focus on preparing for trial or going to trial?
I don't think that we would do anything different. Our in-house legal team, myself, I think that we've always taken the directive with our panel of attorneys that, we want to try to resolve things sooner than later if it's something that is a clear case of liability. So we're not the type of defendant that just likes to, pound sand. We look at each case on its own merits. I think to, Stefanie and Rich's points, there's more opportunity now that we're seizing those moments. So I can't say that we would do things differently, because even pre-COVID, our structure was such that I'd rather either go to early mediation, pre-suit mediation, just trying to resolve things as fast as we can, So I can't say that it would change. There's just so much dynamics now on those cases where we had postured to proceed with the trial that, we need the jury confirmed services of Magna to help us really make better assessments.
That's one thing that I would just like to add to. I think it's also going to depend on the venue. So when we do our jury research, it's going to be specific to the venue at issue and how they're feeling, because there are some areas that were affected very significantly with the pandemic, and then others not so much. So I think if there were going to be a case that we were to take to trial, I think we would want to use Magna services to get a feel for how potential jurors are feeling at this time.
Bob, can I ask Mark something real quick?
Yeah.
It's sort of a two-parter, but when you're doing all those focus groups and jury consulting exercises now, are you building in some sort of universal questions so you can amass data that's not unique to each case? Because it seems like a great opportunity. I'm telling you your business, but that would be, so let me just ask the second piece. I'm curious as to your opinion. One of the things I've wondered about with these virtual trials taking hold is I think it could have an effect on witness veracity. I just think it's easier to lie to a camera than it is to lie to other people. Now, that's my thought, my gut. I'm curious about that. So, somebody just wrote, is this a sales pitch for Magna? You'll have to suffer through it. We're just telling you the way it is. But anyway, so my question, is there a way to research that? Do people lie easier, to a camera than they do in person?
I don't,
I know this is a tough one. I'm throwing you.
Yeah, I don't know if they lie. It's such a general thing. Do they generally lie? Here's the thing. I think if people are afraid jurors are afraid for their health, right? To get into like a room with mass people. So it's pretty hard. Any of these trials, right? The actual trials that we're having, most of the witnesses are being piped in, whether they're in the courtroom next door, like being piped in, like all of now the virtual trials. We have a bunch that are actually coming up. We have some in Delaware, patent cases, actual jury trials. And for some of the ones like the test ones down in Miami that just went on, they do the jury selection virtually. I don't think that's that big of a deal to select the jurors virtually. And then they just bring that jury panel in and they're sort of like social distance and there's not a lot of people in the courtroom and all the witnesses are piped in, or they come in totally remotely, like Rich, like what your point is, So can they lie? I don't know if they're going to lie. I think that, I think it will affect, because I think certain people do not present as well through the camera or being piped in like witnesses as they would if they were sitting in person. If you take a marginal witness, right, that was only going to be so-so to start with in person, right, in a setting where they're used to testifying or talking, like just cocktail talk right? And then now you put them into a separate room where they're being piped in, how that could come across even worse potentially for that particular witness. So, can people not tell the truth a little easier? I think sure, just like it's a little easier to be like a pit bull over email or social media, rather than saying it to someone's face. Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity there, but I think it's got more potential for the witnesses to come in stale for the jurors, I don't think it's a big deal for jurors to be for witnesses to be piped in, or for that matter. I guess I would throw that out to everybody, but Bob, you've tried a lot of cases too. And, playing video, like what I would call debene essay, or like videos of witnesses in lieu of actually having them testify. I've had that work pretty successfully over video, not video teleconference, but we have piped in plenty of witnesses. So I just think this is the new world sort of what's going to be going on here,
Well, let's stay with this topic then, because there's been a lot of questions about remote jury trials, right? There's been some remote hearings, lots of remote hearings. There's been a lot of remote bench trials. Remote jury trials to date, I think it's only been by consent and stipulation. I've yet to hear of a court mandating any of the remote jury trials that have happened so far. It's my understanding everyone's kind of agreed to it. So that could be a sticking point for why it may not take off. But let me ask you this, just generally, what do you guys think? Is a remote jury trial better for the plaintiff or better for the defense? I'll just go to Julia. What do you think? Just doing it remote.
I just, I don't see either way. I can't get my arms around. I know that Zoom and virtual is a way of the future, but for a trial, that power of presence, both on the plaintiffs and the defense side, that attorney making their presentations, the jury, being able to see all of that live, I just, call me old school, I just don't see how it would work. I know in Harris County, which is Houston, there was an attempt, and I don't know of any other cases that they tried to do a virtual trial and it was a disaster. It just didn't work. They had to be suspended. So I just don't, I can't see that it would work.
Somebody from the audience, raised a good question. Will this trigger automatic appeals for denial of due process?
Right.
Because we're having Zoom. And that's something I don't think that's really been Zoom trials. I'm not sure that that's fully been vetted and considered, but it's actually a very good question because plaintiffs want their day in court. They want to present their case. They want to be present in front of 12, whatever jurors, whatever the state, their state has or requires. And if that's been taken away from them and it's now through Zoom, is that going to present a problem? That's a good question.
Very good question.
Yeah.
And that was from someone in the audience.
Yeah, no, there's lots of
We have
chat
a
about
tough audience today.
Yeah, it is a tough audience, but they're engaged, which is important.
Yes.
And so that's a question. To date, I'm only aware of courts saying, hey, we can do this remote. Do you want to? So there's probably not an appeal there yet, but the longer this goes on, courts may start mandating. We're starting trial on Monday, and it's going to be virtual. And then are there appeal issues? Interestingly, looking at the chat, almost every single person said that it benefits the plaintiff to do it remotely. And I don't know that the plaintiff's bar agrees with that. We've been privy to some plaintiff seminars lately, as much as we can do that, and as much as I'll admit, and they've got a lot of rules about who can come into their seminars, and I'm not on their list. And they're adamant. They do not want virtual jury trials. So
the plaintiffs or defendants?
Plaintiffs do not want it. And everyone on the Zoom is saying it benefits the plaintiff. I think that's why everyone listed plaintiff. It helps the plaintiff. It's to the plaintiff's advantage. But they don't think so. Rich, what do you think?
I would have said plaintiffs myself. My gut tells me that, but I'm showing my own bias. I think, certainly in my business, I think we have an uphill. Insurers, I think, have an uphill climb anyway. Jury research has shown that. So my sense is plaintiffs. There's my answer. As far as the due process concern, I think there is a very real question there. What will be interesting, if you think about it, is it's going to take some real guts by an appeals court to rule that way, because the second they do that, they have wiped out everything in their jurisdiction that's been done post-COVID, if it's remote, right? If you rule as a due process violation, that's universal. Yeah, they could try to make it specific, but let's face it, it will be grounded in your right to confront witnesses face to face and all this other stuff. So my guess is that's a tough appeal, even though technically I think it's correct. Interesting thought, or interesting issue.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And let me ask everyone in the chat, why do you think plaintiffs' attorneys don't want to do it virtually? Why do you think they're pushing back? And Mark, I'll ask you the same question. Why do you think plaintiffs' attorneys are pushing back from doing it a virtual jury trial?
Well, I mean, I think there's a few things. I think uncertainty about, like, for example, what we just talked about with the appeal, uncertainty of exactly how that would go. You're sort of testing it out, right? They get one shot and they know that it's money at real money at stake for them. And they're not sure how it's all going to work, the mechanics of it. I think we all know from the defense side and from research, a lot of times, especially in a personal injury case, but even in corporate cases, especially in a personal injury case, right? Do they really like the plaintiff? How does the plaintiff present? How does the plaintiff's family present, right? The people around the plaintiff, right? And if you think that that's not going to come across with the amount of emotion and gravity to create that sort of emotional response that I know we always, right? And for the defense, you're always saying, you got to take sympathy out of it. It starts in jury selection and the sympathy is not part of your decision-making, all that. I would think that would be one of the big concerns for the plaintiffs. And also because I don't think anybody knows how good it can work or not, you know what I mean? I mean, because even with the depositions, when this first started, everyone was like, I'm never taking a remote deposition, right? And now we're taking 300 a day, all remotely, and everyone's pretty good doing it, and all the lawyers have gotten used to it. So I think there's some familiarity or lack thereof, and some suspicion about it, and you don't want to be the first person out of the gates, right, on a big case, and you wind up getting nothing, or get pennies on the dollar. I think what we're all talking about, I don't think either side knows how well it could work or not work right now, And like I said, I think the jury selection is a no-brainer. I think you can pick a jury virtually, and then they're in the court, and then you just bring those jurors in. Is it that much different? I don't know. I mean,
what's the typical? I mean, I'm seeing some of this in the comments that's provoking thoughts by me. But if you really think about it, and I know I'm grossly overgeneralizing here, but in many ways, a plaintiff's case is an emotional appeal. Somebody was wronged. Something's been done that needs to be corrected. Give me money. Whereas a defendant's case tends to be more technical, perhaps more reliant on defense, experts, that kind of thing. And it's just hard for me to envision that. And I know some people are disagreeing with this in the chat, so it's an interesting conversation. But to me, and people are pointing out jurors may be doing their laundry at the same time. So you get these flashy plaintiffs lawyers are going to make their emotional appeal in their opening, where we know a huge proportion of cases are won anyway. And then where the defense presentations tend to be a little bit drier and maybe expert driven anyway, it's just hard for me to envision that translating well to Zoom. Not that I think it's ideal for plaintiffs, but that's why I get to, it's just hard to present a technical case through a camera when people are, got the dog barking in the background, et cetera. That's my gut. I have no clue because we're going to see this play out, but that's why I answer the way I do.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be contrarian here, but I agree with a lot of, but let me be contrarian. The minute I heard it, I didn't like it. I want to form a personal connection with that jury. My number one goal in picking a jury is for them to like me more than plaintiff's counsel. And the longer I'm in front of that jury, the better I think it is. But that's exactly what the really good plaintiffs lawyers think. That's all they want. They want no limits on voir dire. Why? Because they just want to be in front of them. They think that everyone in the world loves them, and we don't. We all want to barf, right? But for an hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, the juries can like them. And I just feel like by doing this remotely, these bigwig, very successful plaintiffs lawyers that we go against all the time, they're going to lose that connection. They're going to lose that jazz. Someone said, because when you're doing a Zoom, you can't wear a chicken suit, as we all know this famous LA lawyer did in closing argument. It's just not going to come off. And also, their antics won't work, right? We were monitoring a trial with that same plaintiff's lawyer. He was doing yoga behind the defense attorney, like stretching, allegedly because he had a bad back. I mean, he's shown videos of himself jogging. You guys all know his name. It starts with Nick and ends with Rowley. And and he takes some videos of himself shirtless, running. So he's in good shape. He doesn't have a bad back. But one of the women in the jury is a yoga instructor. So he's doing yoga in the background. Like, that's not going to work on a Zoom. But the really good ones will probably have some antics going on behind him too, right? Like maybe the book they wrote behind him or something like that, or kids hugging him. Oh, I'm so sorry. They'll do the same crap. It's just not going to be as effective. So I don't know. That's my rant. I think it's better for the defense. I think our style, our comfort with the law, we're all rule followers on the defense side. It fits better. So I'm not against it. And Mark, are you guys set up to handle that stuff? Is that something you guys can do?
Trials? Yeah. And we've been involved. And we're, like I said, we're involved actually setting the jury trial up in Delaware with in Judge Andrews' courtroom for a patent case. That's going to start. But again, most of these right now are not where jurors are coming in via Zoom. The jury selection is done via Zoom, but then the jurors are brought in, kind of like ushered in, like privately and kept socially distanced and whatever. And they're actually in the courtroom, at least for the trials that we were talking about. They're not totally virtual. Now, I don't know whether that won't turn to trying some virtual actual trials where the jurors come in virtually. That I'm not sure about. Whether that will change, down the road, because we're talking about we're talking about a handful, right? You can count on both your hands, how many we're talking about right now in the United States, and with the thing going on in Miami, with the testing in Miami, sort of like the pilot, if you will. So right now, that's the way it's happening. But I mean, you take something like New York, and for those of you who have picked a jury in Manhattan, in downtown, you go in there and there's 1,500 people in the jury room, right? For the cattle call, so to speak. And when is that going to happen again? Like, when are you going to put that many people close together? You know what I mean? So I don't something's going to have to give. And then you have all the criminal trials too, right? That they're going to get precedence over the civil stuff. So I think this is all going to shake out. I don't think it's coming, anytime like tomorrow. The example for New York, I think, is probably the best one, right? How are you going to just start shoving 1,500 people in a room, 1,200 people on top of each other? And to get to what I think some of what the questions or the answers were, some of the perspective of the folks that are sending in questions and answers. I think people are too concerned about their health. Just think about people personally or yourself. Would you sign up to be a juror, to go into Manhattan downtown, to go into a room, a hot room with 1,500 people that you don't know, stacked on top of each other? I don't see, and I don't think you can force people to do it. So I think something's got to give, and I think the trials are going to have to pick back up again in some modified fashion. And I think the virtual jury selection is a real thing that could start to really work. And then it's just a matter of, are they piping the witnesses in? Or are they not, And at some point, you're not going to be able to pipe the witnesses in because you're going to have potentially too many trials where you're not going to have two courtrooms, right? Like a courtroom next door that they testify in, and then half the courtrooms are available now. And you know what I mean? I don't know. So I think we'll see how this all sort of pans out in the fall. But I have a number of trials in the fall that are supposedly the judges they're going. That's what the judges, you get prepared. We're doing it. I don't know.
We're doing it, what, live? Regular trial?
Live, but in this modified kind of approach where the jurors are going to be selected remotely through Zoom. The whole jury selection would run through Zoom, and then they would be brought in, and they're brought in a special entrance, like they're kept separate and socially distanced, and then the lawyers are in the courtroom, but limited staff. There's temperatures taken. There's all this stuff. It's almost like the UFC's Fight Island. If you saw that stuff, like where they get tested and temperatures and all this, they have doctor. That's the plan right now that for the trials that I've had and for the trial that we're doing in Delaware, that's supposedly going to go off in August.
And somebody made a really interesting point in the chat that shouldn't be lost, because I was definitely guilty of this. They said something like, we're applying live trial mores to what will be theoretically virtual trials when we're talking about the way we'll present, et cetera. So it's a really interesting point. I think the point to take from that is if these things do get modified into some sort of a virtual format, we're going to need to develop, both plaintiff and defense, new ways of presenting that are more focused on that type of a presentation. So again, interesting point that was made from one of the comments, and I'm sorry I don't remember who made it, but that's really true. Is we're applying our traditional trial notions to what will be theoretically a completely new, remote, new medium video trial kind of thing. So good point.
Well, the good news is we barely got through half the deck, and we're pretty much out of time, which means that it was a better discussion than just like blindly going through slides, and everyone sent in great questions. So,
yeah, Mark is right. We didn't even get halfway through the slides. This is awful. We didn't do one single poll question, but you guys will all get your credit, right? Tina, do we need to do that one poll question, or is everyone going to get their credit regardless?
You can give it to them.
We'll give them the credit. All right, good.
I think there were so many responses that there's no way that they can't get credit. I mean, did you see all the stuff coming? There was even kind of like a little spat going on for a little bit between a few people. There was some drama going on a little bit. It was pretty good. This is pretty accurate.
I think people were just proving our point, right? Everybody's on edge, right? Even during the seminar.
They're a little angry.
Well, that is it. We have used up all our time. I predicted we wouldn't get through. If you guys want to hear more from us, reach out to Magna. We can do this again. So much more to cover. Thank you for coming. I want to thank Julia, Stefanie, Rich, and Mark, and all the good folks at Magna for hosting this. Mark, do you want to end this? You want to say something?
I'm done. I'm good.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, folks.
I know.